What's up, guys, and welcome all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Tim. Thank you for joining me here on the Tim's Sports Talk. And today we have, who else could it be but our man, Louie T. How's it going today, Lou?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thank you for the grandiose introduction. I really, truly appreciate that. I am doing excellent today. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Glad to have you on. Thanks for being here for sure.
Thank you for having me.
I'm actually nervous. I haven't been nervous in a while. I'm not going to lie to you, but I was so excited to do that thing. I probably planned doing that 4 months ago. And people are like, you're going to have him on? You're going to have him on? Well, I was like, I haven't even asked yet, but it is what it is.
That's
all right.
hilarious.
Thank you for everybody in the chat already. Be it Finesse or Roger, Freddie. Thank you guys, everybody already here. Just a forewarning now, I am terrible at multitasking. So I reading chat and doing this at the same time is basically impossible. But if you would like your comment read, a super chat would be appreciated. I'll make sure to get it read. But all right. Well, before we get into a bunch of Commander stuff as expected, I just want to send my condolences to your Memphis Grizzlies. Ja Morant.
That was brutal last night. That one hurt, man. That was a gut punch that I would have much rather had just lost by 30 last night and just been, because I was resigned to the fact that without Ja, it's going to be tough. We were 20-5 during the regular season without him, but we didn't play the Golden State Warriors 25 times. So I was expecting last night to be, a mercy killing. And what preceded was something that I did not expect. The Warriors played as bad as they could possibly play. The game, the officials called almost no fouls, and it went pretty much the way it had to go for us to have a chance. We led for 47 minutes and 15 seconds of a 48-minute game. And in the final 45 seconds, we found a way to blow it. It was excruciating. We go home, lick our wounds. Ja has a bone bruise in his knee. He's done for the postseason, which I figured already. Jaren Jackson Jr. yesterday had said that he felt bad for Ja, but they were going to rally around him. You don't say that if a guy's going to miss a game. You say that when a guy's pretty much done. So I knew it wasn't going to be good news. And so, it's another lesson learned for this young Grizzlies team. I'm excited about the future, but this isn't the way it was supposed to end this year. But it's all good.
Ja Morant's the real deal. And it's actually cool that you got him at pick 2 and not pick 1, since pick 1 can't seem to find the court.
I think about it all the time. What if? We wanted number 1 so badly back then. What if we would have gotten 1? It would have been terrible. It would have been.
My favorite Zion meme was it was like, all right, how they have the little parentheses of why they're out of the game or whatever, like knee or concussion or something like that. And then Zion Williamson, parentheses, out because of Thanksgiving. It's that is hilarious. I don't know how he can't figure that out. But anyway. Well, hopefully your Memphis Grizzlies do better next season in the postseason. They obviously had a great year. They were 2 seed, right, in the West?
Yes, they were the 2 seed. Well, we're not dead yet. I mean, they have to.
Technically, they're not dead yet. You're right.
Right. They have to put
3-1 deficit without Ja seems pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty daunting. My goal was to take it to 6 or 7. So we still have a chance to do that. They got to take us out on our home court. I never envisioned us losing on our home court. Our season ending on our home court. So I imagine that they're going to fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen.
Fair enough. All right. Well, another thing before we get into this, you've been doing this a long time. How many years has it been now?
August will be 10 years.
Awesome. A decade. Through your time doing this, has there ever been a crazier NFL offseason that what we are going through, all the quarterback movement, the wide receivers movement, the GOAT retires and then unretires. There's so many things that could be discussed through this, but has there ever been a crazier one than this?
Absolutely not even remotely close. It's getting zanier and zanier every single offseason. I feel like I'm saying that every offseason. This is the craziest offseason. But this one takes the cake. I mean, with the quarterback movement, and then, like you said, all the wide receiver trades, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Khalil Mack. No one's talking about that, but that was a big move. Him going from the Bears to the Chargers. It's just so many big time NFL stars changing teams. If you were one of those people, your team's season ends and you just put it down and you don't come back until preseason, a training camp, you're going to be confused because there's so many people that have changed. So many players have changed teams that, it just has shifted the landscape. Like really, it's so AFC heavy right now. Like all the quarterbacks are in the AFC. The NFC is kind of just like this, it's like a ghost town almost. And it's up for grabs, which is why if you're a fan of a team like the Commanders, for instance, why not us? I mean, who's stopping us? Even Green Bay doesn't look as daunting anymore. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely. They still have A-Rod, but so you never know. And I don't know about – I kind of like the idea of Christian Watson, but somebody else mentioned, like, none of their receivers when they draft them do well the first, year or two. So I'll see how Watson does. But anyway, as long as you have Rodgers, though, you always have a chance.
You have a chance, right?
So we'll see. All right. The schedule ready to come out. Do you dabble in the schedule a lot in this time of year?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not the prognosticator. We're gonna go 11-6 with this schedule guy, but I do like to see when we play games. Where we're playing those games. How many in a row do we have on the road? Like last year's schedule quirk was, of course, the 5 games in the division to finish up the final 5 games of the season. And, you always want to look at things like that. Like, when do we play Dallas? When do we play the Giants, Eagles? And who's the first game of the season? Who's the last game of the season type of deal? Is that last game of the season at home in case we need to, for the playoffs purposes? Those are the kinds of things that I look at. How many primetime games did we get? I expect 3 this year. So we'll see if we hit that number. It won't be any less than 3. I don't think it'll be 4 or 5, but we'll see. Those are the kinds of things that I tend to look at, and I try to predict what primetime games will get. But the home teams already, the road schedule already. They've already released the games that are going to be played across the pond. We don't have any of those, so we don't have to worry about any international games or anything like that. So you kind of know what the schedule is. You just want to know how it's going to stack up, where it's lined up. Do we have one of those end of the season, Saturday or Thursday games or whatever, that they put on at the end of the season, the 2 Saturdays that they do the last 2 weeks of the season. So those are the kind of things you look at.
Yeah. Last year they put together our schedule and then said, oh shoot, division. All right, here you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Take them all. Okay.
Eagle,
Cowboy, Giants. Sounds
Giants. Good. That'll do it. Exactly.
Yeah, and that obviously proved to be pretty tough because the Eagles figured themselves out later in the year. They would have loved to play them early, right? Before they figured out, oh wait, we can run the ball and win games, not throw the ball with Jalen Hurts. But yeah, so that definitely hurt. And then COVID and the whole 9. Door Gunner says, thank you for the super chat there, Door Gunner. Eagles fans talking more reckless than the boys fans are. Well, they have a lot to talk about this offseason. So outside of that quarterback spot, it's going to be interesting. Awesome. All right. So before we get into this draft, Washington's offseason was interesting as well. Something huge happened and a lot of little things, I guess, right? So, of course, the Carson Wentz trade. So how do you feel about how did you feel then? How do you feel about it now? Are you happy about it? Like, what can you tell me about this Carson Wentz trade?
So I always talk about this because everything that happens for a reason. And this trade was 2 years in the making, essentially. When Ron first got here, talked about changing the culture, and he kept repeating himself over and over again. It takes 3 to 4 years to change a culture. When you're in the military, that's how long it takes. And he was essentially setting the template like, hey, guys, don't expect us to win these first 2 years. I'm trying to change the culture, and I got a lot to work on. And we got to change this roster. We got to change the way we view ourselves. We got to change the way the public and the perception of us on the outside. There's a lot of things, how we feel about ourselves, how we conduct ourselves, things of that nature. And we won the division in the first year, and it messed everything up. I talked about that ad nauseum. Like, hey, it was the best thing and the worst thing for Ron at the same time, because you want your players to experience winning so that it's easier to lead. Because if you tell them, hey, follow me, I can show you how to win, and you win in year 1, it's easier for that message to get across to the players. Right. But to win at 7-9, for all of these crazy expectations from the fan base, and then the outward perception of the media, hey, they got Ryan Fitzpatrick now with that defense. Oh yeah, we're not playing you know, the San Francisco 49ers, and forgot who their quarterback was that year. He was terrible. I can't think of his name. He's
Mullins or something?
Yes, Nick Mullins.
Yeah.
Not playing those guys. You know, you're not playing against the little sisters of the poor.
Driscoll.
Like we did.
It wasn't even like Stafford in Detroit that year.
You know, we got Stafford. He beat us.
No, Stafford beat us. That was a different
year. He came back and beat us.
Driscoll was
but
the
year
year before. Okay.
The Bengals had to play without Joe Burrow in the second half.
Yes.
And then we got a bum quarterback there.
Ryan Finley.
He ate us up in the preseason that year, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's crazy, you know, how the perception of this defense was, even though we hadn't played anybody. And, you know, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to change this offense drastically. You got Curtis Samuel, you got William Jackson III. They made some big offseason moves. This team's ready to win. And people talking as crazy as this is the second best team in the NFC. And I'm like, whoa. What are you guys talking? We won 7 games last year. What are you guys talking about?
Especially with Greenberg. Don't be surprised if Fitzpatrick takes them to the Super Bowl.
I mean, there was a lot of that, though. You know what I mean? Rich Eisen was like, yo, I really want to see where this goes. I really think they got a shot. I'm like,
he's never made the playoffs, but now he's going to the Super Bowl.
I've said this already. It's in the NFL bylaws that if Ryan Fitzpatrick is your quarterback, you're not allowed to make the postseason if he starts a game for you. So I knew we were doomed from the minute he started the Chargers game. But because of that, and remember, Ron swung for the fences that offseason going after Stafford, right? Mm-hmm. So the expectation was already there that we need a quarterback. We're hunting after a quarterback. We missed last year, and they were hoping Fitzpatrick would be a 2-year stopgap. Like, hey, maybe this guy could be not only good for us this year, maybe even next year, give us a shot. I mean, open this window up for us a bit. But that didn't happen. So now you're back at it. And Ron realized very quickly, look, you know, this roster is good. It's not where we want it to be, but it's good. But we don't have a chance without a quarterback. So they went into the quarterback fray this offseason. They tried Rodgers. He was never coming here, but he went back to Green Bay. They tried Derek Carr. He wasn't leaving Vegas. That's part of the reason Josh McDaniels took that job, because they had Derek Carr already there, an established quarterback he could win with right away. So he wasn't coming to Washington. You know, they inquired about Baker Mayfield. He wasn't available then. So they turned their attention to guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Carson Wentz. Jimmy Garoppolo has the no trade clause. And he said, I wouldn't waive that to go to Washington. Like,
that's ridiculous.
Embarrassing, right?
It's like, just absolutely. And I'm glad. I'm happy about it. Thanks, Jimmy. Do me a favor. Don't want to come here, Jimmy. Thanks.
Exactly. Like, we don't want you here. But the fact that Jimmy's turning us down is like, that's the state of affairs in Washington at the time. So you go to the one guy that doesn't have a no trade clause, and that's Carson Wentz. He can't say no. And the Colts were looking to move him desperately. And instead of him being released and then having to fight with 3 or 4 other teams, they just said, hey, let's go and make the move. They make the move. It sets off this domino effect, because you've got to eat the $28 million that comes attached with Carson Wentz. You only had $33 million to begin with, so you only left with $5 million worth of cap space. So now you got to start chopping away at some cap to free up some space yourself. And now Eric Flowers is gone, Landon Collins is gone, Matt Ioannidis is gone. So now all of a sudden you go from, all right, let's see what we can do to supplement this roster, you know, in free agency, to now we got the quarterback, which is the biggest thing in the offseason, but now we actually can't go in free agency and spend, and we're going to have to find guys via the draft that are ready to play now, because this is a big season for us. We want to win. And, you know, when you look at, again, the landscape of the NFC conference, not just the NFC East, which is wide open, but the conference itself, you say, look at the 49ers. Like, the 49ers weren't great. They had Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback last year. They weren't a great offensive football team, yet they found themselves in the NFC Championship game. And if Jaquiski Tartt could catch an interception that came down like a punt, they probably are going to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, why not us? That's what you got to be thinking if you're Ron Rivera, if you're Scott Turner, if you're Jack Del Rio. You know, you get some guys back from injury. You know, and it's almost like Curtis Samuel's another draft pick, because he really didn't play last year. Right. You know, so you're getting another guy back that you feel really confident about. So they feel really good. But the Wentz move was out of desperation. I've talked about it. Like, they had to do something at quarterback. And that was the last, you know, resolution, essentially. Like, it was the last thing that they could do that was available to them, was go out and get Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I liked the Carson Wentz move personally. And somebody asked me like 2 weeks before, like, what do you think about the Carson Wentz? Carson Wentz coming here? And I didn't think it was even a thing at the time, but I was like, honestly, this might be best case scenario. Like, you don't have to give up a ton of capital.
Mm-hmm.
You got a guy under contract for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's only $15 million in cap space that's guaranteed. So, like, I didn't like the idea of waiting until he cut. I actually liked trading for that contract, as crazy as it sounds. Obviously, if they wanted to eat any of it, I would have taken it. But having a guy now, if he succeeds, you have a guy under contract for 2 more seasons instead of if we waited until he's cut and we somehow do win the Carson Wentz, contest or whatever, bringing him in. Now, if he does well, you're way overpaying for Carson Wentz.
Right.
Like, it's going to be an outrageous number. So I actually really appreciate. As soon as I saw the text, like, "Hey, we got Carson Wentz," I was actually super excited about it. Did I want to give up 2/3 or a third and a second? Not really, but hey, this is a guy that has MVP potential that he showed in 2017. We'll see if he can ever get there. You mentioned the 2 cuts, Matt Ioannidis and Eric Flowers. Landon Collins, we already knew was gone. Like, that was just a matter of when, not if. Which one were you more surprised about out of those 2? Because honestly, I didn't like either, but I guess I'm kind of more okay with one. But which one were you more surprised with?
I was more surprised, and his agent was, by the way he responded, by the Matt Ioannidis cut. That was the one that kind of was like, whoa. First of all, we don't have a lot. We knew we were losing Tim Settle in free agency. He wasn't coming back. And so we already knew we were a little light at that position as is, and I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Jack Del Rio sit down one-on-one with Julie Donaldson, but in that interview, he talked about how defensive tackle became a need when they cut Ioannidis. They knew they were going to lose Tim Settle, but Ioannidis being released forced defensive tackle to become a need and moved a lot higher up the list in the hierarchy of things that they had to get done in the draft. So, that was the one that kind of shocked me. Eric Flowers, I'm not the biggest Eric Flowers fan. Like, he was solid, don't get me wrong. And where he came from versus, where he was drafted and what he was projected to be as a first round pick, and how, he kind of flopped in New York and then not really all that great in Jacksonville. Then we get him and he resurrects his career under Callahan. We trade him away to he signs a big deal with the Dolphins, and we trade for him back here in Washington. And Masco gets his hands on him, and he continues to play well. I love the development. I love the story. I loved everything about him in that regard, but he was a solid player. He wasn't a needle mover per se. So, I look at Andrew Norwell and I say, okay, we probably get the same production, if not better, out of Andrew Norwell. I'm not really hurting there. Ioannidis was the one because we've seen the potential out of Matt Ioannidis. I really felt like last year he was just getting his bearings under him. Remember, this is a guy that missed pretty much all of 2020 with the injury. And then he comes back and he gets COVID in camp, and it takes him ages to get back on the field, get back into condition and everything. I felt like 2021 was just one big cluster F for Matt Ioannidis. And I was really looking forward to him getting back to his self in 2022. And unfortunately, he may do that with the Carolina Panthers now, not here in Washington.
Yeah, we keep switching players, right? But no, I 100% agree. I was really upset to lose Matt Ioannidis, and I was upset to lose both, to be honest. I didn't want to lose either. But when I found out we're saving a clean $10 million to cut Eric Flowers, I'm like, all right, that makes sense. Like, he's a guard. We're paying him $10 million. That makes sense. But to save $6 million to cut Matt Ioannidis, like $6 million, that's too much for a rotational defensive end, or defensive tackle rather. But second round draft capital, which we'll get into later, like, that's fine. Let's just pay. Let's go ahead and send that off. But we're totally in agreement on that one. But mentioning Flowers, now we have, and you mentioned Norwell, and now we have Trey Turner. Do those two, in your mind, suffice after losing Flowers and Sheriff to free agency?
I think the jury's still out on Trey Turner.
Okay.
I think Andrew Norwell is going to come in and be really solid for us. Now, the Trey Turner thing is interesting. He's regressed greatly since his Pro Bowl years in Carolina. Now, he hasn't had John Masco since he left Carolina, the first time. So he didn't play well with the Chargers, which is why they released him 1 year into that 3-year extension he had signed with. I want to say it was Carolina. They traded him. He still had like 3 years left in his deal. They released him after 1 year, and then the Steelers signed him, and he was horrible for the Steelers. So I'm anxious to see if Matt Sko can, work his magic on Trey Turner and get him back to the player that he once was. But I wasn't really concerned about losing Sheriff. I was one that advocated for letting him walk last year. Like, don't pay this guy $18 million.
Right.
Like, if he doesn't want to be here, clearly, he's milking the situation. And we put him in the situation of power for him to really milk us dry. So I'm not mad at him for that. A lot of fans got upset at him. Don't get mad at him. We put him in that position to be able to collect all that money. But he had no intentions of signing a long-term deal here. Never. And so at that point, I was like, let him go. But they held on to him 1 extra year. I wasn't really concerned because I saw when he was injured, and we know that's something that occurred every year. Wes Schweitzer came in and did a bang-up job. So I'm like, worst case scenario, you got Eric Flowers, you insert Wes Schweitzer, we're fine, even though I would prefer Schweitzer to come off the bench because he can play all 3 interior offensive line positions. I'm like, hey, either way, I feel good about Wes Schweitzer. Then you release Eric Flowers, and I'm like, okay, it's getting a little dicey here. Then you bring in Norwell. Okay, good. Now we got, Sadiq Charles and Wes Schweitzer and some guys that can fill in at that other guard spot. And then you bring in Trey Turner because we talked about needing that depth. And all of a sudden, he may be the starter that they plug in at right guard. So it's interesting to see what those 2 guys will bring to the table. I don't think there will be a significant drop-off between the 2 that we had last year and Flowers and Sheriff and the 2 we have now potentially. And we don't know who that guy will be. I'm assuming it'll be Trey Turner's job to lose at right guard. He'll get the first crack at it. But whomever fills in that right guard void, whether it's Sadiq Charles, Wes Schweitzer, or Trey Turner, I feel confident that they'll come in and be competent.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I'm in 100% agreement with you on John Matsko. He's done a tremendous job since he's been here. He's like one of the few position coaches I think that's like unbelievable on this team, which is awesome. And pretty much you give him any. We were on our 4th center, 3rd guard last year or something crazy, and we're still able to protect Heineke. And PFF had us graded pretty high, so that was great. So awesome. Before we get into the draft, and yes, DMV Sports Zone, what's up, fellas, fans, cough. Tim was asleep on Washington draft. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the draft.
I watched.
Yeah, so not a fan at all.
I know what Tim feels like.
So we'll definitely dive into that. And honestly, some people I think could look more into it and feel better. I don't know if I feel. I think there's a chance I feel worse. I am not a fan, but we'll definitely get into that one for sure. Last question before that, though. Somebody did get released recently, and that guy is James Bradberry, or I guess maybe it's supposed to be a June 1st cut, I guess, so maybe he's not technically on the market yet. I'm not exactly sure, but either way, it said he's going to be released if he's not already. Do you view James Bradberry as the best Commander and possibly a guy that we truly do go after?
Well, by far and away, he's the best Commander, but he to me isn't a guy that they will aggressively go after. I think they'll do their due diligence, but I think he's more likely to end up in Philadelphia or, I keep saying like New England would be a great spot for him, but
they just lost JC Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know if they're even in the market for one or not, but it would make a lot of sense. That's the kind of player that they would go after. He's still only 28 years old, so still got some good football left in him, but more likely than not, I think he ends up in this division somehow, some way. I think with the money that they've already spent, and I get it, you got Kendall Fuller on the hook for another year after this year. Same with William Jackson III. Their contracts expire at the exact same time, but he was a 4-year, $40 million deal. I think William Jackson III was something like 3 years. I don't know.
30. It was 3 year, 34 or something like that. 36.
It was a good deal. It was good. It was solid money. We were shocked that it was, what it was. And so you've got, 23, let's call it $23 million tied up between 2 corners per, on average.
It was like 42. I think it was 14.
It's something like this. It's in the 40s.
Yeah,
like
you're
$14
right.
million.
I was getting
like
the Curtis Samuel one mixed up because he was like 34. But you're right, 14 million.
It's something like that to that effect. So you're looking at $24 million. For those 2 guys combined.
Yep.
I don't think they're looking to add because Bradberry is not going to be cheap. I don't think they're looking to add another pricey corner. And keep in mind, Bradberry is a boundary corner. He is not a slot corner, which is what we need more so, because you have Benjamin St-Juste, which is another boundary corner. Kendall Fuller has shown that he's better outside than inside. He was better inside than outside the first time we had him. He's more so an outside corner now than he is an inside corner. And William Jackson III is definitely a boundary corner only. So you would be adding another boundary corner to a team that already has you can never have enough corners. Let's just make that distinction. You can never have enough corners, but you can only put so many of them on the field if none of them can go inside, right? So I just don't see how that is an investment that they're looking to make for a team that was at one point this season struggling with cap space. I don't know if that's the smartest decision to make, knowing that you have guys to re-sign, Terry McLaurin, Cole Holcomb, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that's a good investment to make if you're Washington. But, I mean, I've already made the case that if they really wanted him, they could, because unlike the Carson Wentz situation, you could structure the deal where his base salary this year is $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And then next year is when you're paying, $19 million at base. You know what I'm saying? So they can structure it to make sense for them this year where it won't hurt them. And then next year where they've got all this cap space, they'll be able to kind of absorb it a little bit better. But I just don't see the value for them doing that. I don't think, everybody. And once you get all the fans on board with something like this, like, oh yeah, they're going to go after this guy. They're not going after him. That's how it goes. Everybody's, we're going to get Chris Olave. We're not going to get Chris Olave because everybody thinks you're getting Chris Olave.
Yeah, or Kyle Hamilton. That's or right. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. All right. Well, now we're going to get into this draft. So yeah, we already talked about how I feel a little bit, but how have you become so knowledgeable, I guess, about the game where you're able to break down these players? Did you play, or is this all self-taught at home and just research and things like that? Or did you have real experience in a college team or anything like that?
It's a little bit of all of that. So I didn't play at the college level. I played in high school. Yep. I was a baseball guy growing up, so I was a baseball, basketball, and then I played football at the very end. But I was a baseball dude. So, I didn't play football until I got to high school, but I knew so much about the game because my dad, I was watching football with my dad when I was a little kid. So I loved the game of football for a very long time. I taught myself pretty much everything there was to know about football. And then, as I got into doing this, I taught myself how to watch, and I would love to watch film with someone who, does this for a living with the trained eye. There's certain things that I look for. And that's the beauty of watching film. It's subjective, right? You could be watching one thing. I could be watching something else totally. We could come together, formulate two totally different opinions about the same player. We watch the same 4 games on the same guy. And you come away saying, this guy's awesome. And I'm like, this guy's terrible. What are you talking about? So, there's no science necessarily to watching film except what's your preference? What are you looking for? Whatever position you're watching, there may be certain things that you look for. And, there are some technical aspects that I would love to flush out, certain things that are being taught to do that I would love to look for. But, as far as, just watching these prospects, seeing what they bring to the table, how they fit in, all that stuff, a lot of that stuff was self-taught. And it's just been years and years of just, doing this and watching and listening to people talk that, know about the subject matter and just kind of, putting all the pieces together.
Fair. Yeah. I think you could learn, especially nowadays with YouTube, and you could listen to so many different people. So yeah, it's not really even a knock anymore to be self-taught. There's so many avenues and assets that you have. So awesome. Cool. I didn't know for that one for sure. I know how you became a fan and all that good stuff. I've heard things like that, but I wasn't sure on that one. So awesome. All right. A couple of just broad questions about this draft. I'm curious. What was your biggest surprise for us in this draft? What shocked you the most as you were watching it and as it happened?
Good or bad?
Biggest. I'm going to ask the next question just to get favorite and least favorite pick. So, but I'm
the most surprising thing was us getting Sam Howell in the 5th round, because I never imagined him even being available in the 5th round. I was really shocked at how the whole quarterback situation played out. Not because, no quarterback was taken until 20 and then no quarterback was taken at all in the 2nd.
Yeah.
I think no quarterback taken in the second was shocking to me, but at the time, but that again, that was the way we felt about the draft class going in. So, okay, fine. But the fact that we go through the third round and then we go to the fourth round and Malik Willis still hasn't been taken, and then we get to the fifth round and Sam Howell's still sitting there, I'm like, what? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So, that would be the one where I was like, whoa, okay. And the fact that we just said, you know what, to hell with it. He was the highest rated player on our board in the second round. He was the highest rated player on our board in the third round. He was the highest rated player on our board in the fourth round. Okay, F it. We're going to take him. Screw it. We're going to take him here in the fifth round.
So. Yeah, fair enough. And that's a great choice but there was definitely quite a few surprises. Like the trade back, you could say Jahan Dotson was a surprise for most people. I know your face was pretty surprised on that
the trade back, I mocked that. Like I actually
you mocked it perfectly.
Perfectly.
Right.
Like the only thing I didn't get was the compensation. I had third and fifth. We got third and fourth. So I felt even better about it.
And in your mock, did you have Olave and Hamilton available at 11 like that?
I did. Both of those guys
so you were even available. Okay. So even with all the stuff going on, you had it.
Yeah. I didn't think Olave would. I never thought that Olave would be gone at 11. Like I didn't think somebody would come up to take Chris Olave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I thought, oh yeah, no worries. We could trade back to 19 and Olave might still be there. You know what I mean? Like in my mind, Olave, like who wants Chris Olave? We're the only ones out here that are, champion Chris Olave. He'll be there. Like,
yeah.
Now, clearly we weren't the only team that really was high on Chris Olave.
No. Fair enough. All right, cool. So, and yes, your favorite and least favorite picks in this draft. You're like one pick each.
My favorite pick in the draft is Jahan Dotson because of what he represents for this offense. He gives us a reliable option across from Terry. I still don't know what Curtis Samuel, never, ever trust a man with two first names, looks like in a Washington uniform for an extended period of time. Like we still don't know. Like the most action that we saw this guy have in any given game was the Atlanta game. And he actually played well in that game, had a couple of fourth down conversions, a key third down catch. Like he was solid in that game, but we don't really know what we can expect from him. And I don't like relying on guys that I can't trust. So this is the first time Terry's going to have a guy. And, one of the things that they talked about when they selected him was this guy played 32 straight games at Penn State. So he's a guy that you can rely on to be available. The best ability is availability in this league. And Jahan Dotson has been that. We know the guy's got quicks. We know the guy's got speed. We know the guy's got exceptional hands and route running ability. Everything you're looking for opposite of Terry, we're going to get that in Jahan Dotson. And it'd just be adding a little bit of cherry on top, icing, if you will, if Curtis Samuel's able to stay healthy, if De'Ami Brown's able to now flourish as a fourth option, if Cam Sims can come in here and assert himself whenever opportunities present themselves. I just feel like it just strengthened the entire wide receiving core, but more importantly, gave Terry a reputable option opposite of him. My least favorite pick was the very next pick that we made in Fedarian Mathis, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. Now, I know why we did it. I know the purpose that it serves. I know exactly why they did it. And I've talked about this. I harped on it. I talked about it. And then it was so funny to see Ben Standing have an article yesterday talking about he interviewed several GMs around the league. And one of the things that they said was, there weren't a lot of defensive tackles, left. It was a very thin draft class. If you were going to get one, he was like the cutoff. He was the last guy left. And if you didn't get him there, you weren't going to get him at 98, which our next pick was. So you're talking about 51 selections. Good luck waiting all the way until then. So I knew why they did it. It didn't make me feel any better about the selection, but I knew why they did what they did. And Jack Del Rio reinforced it. He's like, once we lost Matt Ioannidis, and he had to release him, defensive tackle became a need. It wasn't a want. It wasn't a, hey, let's add depth. No, we absolutely have to draft a defensive tackle that can come in and play right away. So, it became a much bigger need than it was going into the offseason.
Clearly, because the defensive tackle position going into last year was our strongest. It was our strength, right? With the 2 first rounders and then Matt and Tim settled. So now all of a sudden we only have the 2 first rounders. And I understand the quote need because they do play 50% of snaps. But I didn't like the idea, and this is a part of the reason why I didn't like it, is we needed now to replace 2 5th-round picks with a 2nd-round pick. And I know you're saying, okay, so your argument basically to that would be that there was nobody else in this draft. Like there's nobody deep that could be. I would have gone free agency then. I think Tulele, isn't he a guy that Ron coached? Or I would have gone somewhere else because to me there was way higher needs on the board. Linebacker, obviously. You could gone state. Jaquan Brisker was on the board right there. That could have been an interesting guy. The fact, and people are saying in the chat right now that I hate the Jahan Dotson. I don't hate Jahan Dotson. I think he's a solid player. There's nothing wrong with Jahan Dotson as a player and also as a human being. He seems to be a very high character guy, very Ron guy, which is awesome. One of the big reasons why I love Terry and Jonathan Allen are very high character individuals. So I don't hate Jahan Dotson. I hate pick 16 Jahan Dotson. And I have a bias against receivers, especially ones that are under 6 foot in the first round. I feel like you can get quality later. And if you look at like the top 20 wide receivers, most of them are outside of the first round as well. Even if you go into the top 10, like 6 of those or 7 of those are outside of the first round. And then also you pair that with who was there and available. Like I liked George Pickens. How did you feel about George?
I liked him. I didn't love him. And you again, when you're talking about Washington, I just hit on availability.
Yeah.
You're talking about a guy in
Yeah.
George Pickens that barely played in college since his freshman year because of injuries. A guy that only played 4 games for Georgia last year. Like that's not what you're looking to do if you're Washington, is to bring another guy in here that has injury concerns that you're not sure about, that, you know, at any moment, and it can happen to anybody, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to be stuck in a position where you knew this guy had some injury concerns going in, and then he injures himself, and you're saying we did it again. And now Terry's out there by himself because who knows what's going to happen with Curtis Samuel. So I think they were looking for something more stable and more reliable. George Pickens showed the ability, but he didn't play enough. They wanted a guy, they saw this guy, Jahan Dotson, go up against Ohio State 2 years in a row and shred them 2 years in a row with nothing around him, right? They watched him go up against, you know, Big Ten Michigan and these Big Ten defenses that were stout year in, year out, and put up numbers. They know what this guy is capable of versus a George Pickens where you're like, I'm not really that sure about George Pickens. Super talented, you know, has the physical traits, characteristics, things you look for, but I don't know if I can count on this guy. Is he reliable? Not sure. That was something that I think they really put a lot of emphasis into this draft.
You're clearly, yeah, because as you said, Federi Matheson and Brian Robinson was also a guy that stayed healthy. I'm not sure about Percy Butler and like the rest of the field, but yeah, so clearly that's something that they put emphasis on. I don't like it at all personally, because I feel like we needed a wide receiver with size, right? We have a bunch of dudes that are Terry 6 foot 205, Diami 6 foot 200 or something like that. Curtis Samuel 5'11", 195. These are guys that we have already on the roster, and yes, clearly Dotson's a clear upgrade over Diami. Like it's not a conversation.
Right.
But and then is he a clear guy or a clear upgrade over Curtis? I guess we'll wait and see on that one. I don't know if you have a strong opinion.
I can answer that. Yes, he is.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Because you got to understand, Curtis Samuel was not a natural wide receiver. He's a running back. His whole entire life, he gets to Ohio State. They have him playing this hybrid role, but he's still like more of a running back than he's a wide receiver. Then he gets to the NFL, and he finally makes that full conversion over to wide receiver. You still see some of the running back tendencies. They used him that way his final year in Carolina, but he'll tell you, I'm a natural running back. I'm still honing my craft as a receiver. Jahan Dotson's a receiver through and through. So to me, he's light years ahead of anybody else not named Terry McLaurin on the roster.
Right. And another reason why I just didn't like him at 16 is like all the comps that people are like, oh, he could be Lockett, Deshaun Jackson, Steve Smith, Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown is somebody that I think he could potentially be without the crazy. Deontay Johnson's the guy you compared to. The highest out of those guys is a second rounder, pick 49 with Deshaun Jackson. Everybody else, third rounder, sixth rounder. And somebody did mention Santana Moss. He was also pick 16, but also ran a legit 4.31, not a 4.43. But we'll see. So that's another. I think that the receiving picks, you get better, the great word value later in the draft, which is why I don't know.
So let me ask you this.
Okay.
If we remove the pick, or let's say we got Dotson at 27, say we traded back with Green Bay's second pick at 28.
Okay.
And we got Dotson at 28. Would you feel better about it then?
Of course. So just by definition, I would have to, right? Because he's picked later and the value is better. Now, would I be thrilled with the pick? Probably not, for similar reasons that I just said. I didn't want a receiver at 5'10" and a half, 180 pounds and things like that. So I would still not be in love. But by definition, I'd feel better at that spot.
Okay. Fair enough. You've got your reasons. I'm not here to convince you about that, because I wanted bigger, but I didn't want Drake London. And
I'm with you.
I didn't want Drake London.
Happy about that.
And I was like, Treylon Burks is cool, but he's raw. He's not a route runner. He was a guy that they just got him the football at Arkansas. He wasn't a technical, he was the exact type of guy Curtis Samuel was, which is why I was like, I really didn't want Curtis Samuel in free agency. I wanted, if you recall, the receiver from the Titans that went to the Jets, Corey Davis.
Yeah,
I wanted Corey Davis because I said he's the quintessential number 2 wide receiver. He'll come right in, he'll play, he'll give you everything we're looking for at that number 2. Give us a little bit of size. He can run. Everything that we're looking for. Corey Davis will provide that for us as a number 2. Whereas Curtis Samuel, as I talked about, he's a jack of all trades. I like to call it Pam Mom. Proficient at many, master of none type of guy. He's really good at a lot of things, not great at any one thing. And so I was like, I don't really know how I feel about that. But, they were convinced. Ron had him in Carolina, Scott Turner had him in Carolina, convinced this was the guy. So I said, okay, we're going to roll with it. I see Treylon Burks as a bigger version of that. He can go up and get the 50-50 ball. He was one of the best at attacking it in the draft. But you don't want to make your living on, hey, just throw it up and go get it. You need some technical aspect to this as well. And in our offense, the way that they, with Scott Turner, the way he diagrams things, that's not something that they're looking to take advantage of a ton. It's just, hey, just throw it up to a guy or back shoulder fade. There's, timing and rhythm to this offense. You need guys that can run routes and get open. And I think Jahan Dotson kind of fits more along the lines of what they're looking for offensively, schematically, than a guy like Treylon Burks. So to me, he fit what they wanted to do. So it made a ton of sense. I understood it.
Yeah, I was not super on the Treylon Burks, but I mean, as I've said, I'm not a receiver in the first round kind of guy. I just that's not fine. Where I want to go in the first round. I feel like there's the great saying, the better value at the first round. You can get good receivers later in this draft, but especially in a deep receiving class. But anyway, and also I'll say this: if Dotson was the pick at 16, what could have made me feel a lot better is round 2 and 3, right? But as you already talked about, you don't like the Fedarian Mathis. I also don't like the Brian Robinson. I think you said you did in your video. I'll ask in a minute, but when you have if you tell me it is what was available there was Jaquan Brisker rather, and Leo Chenal, 2 positions of need, 2 arguably best player available as well in those spots. You did nothing for me in day 1 and 2. I was so mad about day 1 and 2. But how'd you feel on that Brian Robinson? Because yes, I wanted a second running back, but not in the first 100 picks.
I love the pick, actually.
Okay.
And I knew they were gonna. So I tried to, people like yourself, I tried to speak to you before the draft, like, hey,
I was trying to think, Kenny Walker, Breece
Understand,
Hall, like these are
they're
just smoke screens,
looking
right?
at
Stop.
running back as
Yeah.
a high priority
High
need.
priority, yep.
Because you don't interview Breece Hall, you don't interview Isaiah Spiller, you don't interview Kenneth Walker III if you're not looking at the top backs in this draft class.
True.
They interviewed all of those guys and another 2 running backs that were a little crazy enough. The Davis Price kid from LSU went in the 3rd round to the 49ers. So he went a lot higher than I thought he was going to go. So they interviewed backs that they thought were going to go relatively early in this draft. And so that told me, and I tried to convey that message to anybody that was listening, we're going back here. It could be as early as 47. So prepare yourself mentally. If you're not in the camp of we need a running back early, we could push that down to later in the draft. Prepare yourself mentally. They are going to take a running back early in this draft,
right? As
early as 47, as late as 113, which was our 4th round pick before we traded with Carolina. We had an additional one at 120 that we ultimately packaged up with 186 to get the 2 5th rounders. But I said it's in that window somewhere from 2nd to 4th, they're going to get themselves a running back. And when they traded back and picked up that 3rd and that additional 4th, it opened that window up an additional 7 picks from 47 to 120. But I'm like, they're getting a running back somewhere in there, and they happen to settle in on one at 98 with Brian Robinson. And I was a big Peyton Barber fan. I was a big, hey, this guy serves a purpose. Okay. He's averaging 2.8 yards.
2-yard Barber.
I don't care because those 2 yards are important.
They came on a lot of 3rd and 1s. Yes.
Yep, 3rd and 1. It's 4th and 1. He had the biggest play, and that come from behind win against the Eagles in week 1. The biggest play of that game. Well, I shouldn't say that. The biggest offensive play, because the biggest play in the game was the pick by the cornerback that started that whole downslide when we were down 17-0.
Darby?
No. It was he's in Atlanta now. Fabian Moreau.
Fabian Moreau.
Yes, Fabian Moreau.
Yeah.
He started all of that with his pick, and everything kind of snowballed from there. But that 4th and 2 run that he had when we decided to go for it instead of settling for the field goal, and he breaks a tackle, gets to the outside, dives for the 1st down marker. That's a huge play. Like that was that to me encapsulated and epitomized what Peyton Barber was about. It didn't matter if there was a defender meeting him as soon as he got the football. He found a way to get that yard no matter what. And we lost that when we decided to hold on to Jarrett Patterson over him. And they thought Gibby could fill that role. That's why they did it. Like, oh, Gibson will be fine. He's a big back. We'll teach him how to run behind his pads. And that's just not his thing.
You're right.
So they're getting physicality. They're getting toughness. But Brian Robinson's a good running back. Like anybody that watched him at Alabama, no, he's not a home run hitter. He's not gonna, he's not gonna outrun the field. But what he is gonna do is he's gonna have a ton of doubles, the occasional triple, and he's gonna run through contact. He's a physical guy, and the thing that Ron Rivera keeps talking about, which lets you know this is something that is on his mind, ball security. He's not going to put the ball on the carpet, something that Antonio Gibson did more than any running back in the National Football League last season. And so that's something they will not stand for this year. If he cannot protect the Duke, they will yank him out of the lineup. And last year, they didn't have any choice but to go back to him. We didn't have enough talent to sit him down and keep him on the bench. This year, they've got a guy that they are fully confident that can come in and play all 3 downs if need be in Brian Robinson. And so I like the pick. I had no problems with the selection. We got tougher, as they said, as a football team. We got tougher after day 2 of the draft. You know, I love the Robinson pick because he can do everything. He can catch it. He can run it. I think he's solid in pass protection. So he brings an element to this team that we lacked, which was a second 3-down back. We only had Gibson, and then we had, we had J.D. McKissick in a, 3rd down specialist type of role. We got now 2 3rd down, first through, 2nd, 3rd down backs. Whereas, we didn't have that before. So we had 2 3-down backs. I love it. And we got toughness, and we got a guy in short yardage, which I thought hurt us a lot last year in certain instances. We got that back now.
It definitely did. And last thing on the day 1 and 2 is any one of these picks I would have been okay with if the other 2 were better. I feel like that's kind of where I'm at, because I don't think any of these guys are bad players. Like, I don't think we drafted a straight up bust in the first 3 rounds. And if that's your, and not you specifically, but if that's your goal is just, hey, I just want to get 3 guys that will play for me, then great. That's awesome. I would like to try to get guys that would be great at that spot, which is also why I wanted to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, because I think if you get an offensive lineman of a high caliber and then you give it to the guy that we've been talking about quite a bit, John Matsko, you're not looking at just a good player potentially. You may be looking at a Hall of Fame player. He can work with that kind of a guy for an extended amount of time, which is why I wanted to go that direction higher, but it is what it is.
But you could also play devil's advocate there and say, well, aren't you wasting the brilliance of John Matsko if you give him this super talented player in the first round? Isn't the gift that John Matsko blesses us with the ability to give him anything and he turn it into a serviceable player? So I think you could look at it from your perspective. Hey, you give this guy a first round pick, you could turn him into a Hall of Famer and all pro. But you could also say, we don't need to do that. We can give him Charles Leno Jr., the guy that got released last year that was on the scrap heap, and he could turn him into one of the better pass protecting left tackles in football. We can go shine up and refurbish, Andrew Norwell and Trey Turner and get these guys in here, and they could become really good, players for us up front. And I think that's more so the way they're looking at it. Like, hey, if we got this guy, John Matsko, it's sort of like what Green Bay looks at with Aaron Rodgers. Like, we don't have to give Aaron Rodgers the first round wide receiver for what? I mean, I'm speaking to your theory on drafting first round wide receivers. Packers haven't done it in eons. But I tend to believe that, Aaron Rodgers deserved a first round wide receiver. They instead took a second rounder and a fourth rounder and a seventh rounder. And I'm like, what are we doing here? But they say
Adams
Aaron
turned out to
Rodgers.
be pretty good, right?
We got Aaron Rodgers. So what difference does it make, right? So
Adams turned out to be. We'll see what he does.
He was a second round. He was a second round pick,
right?
Yeah, and he turned out to be really good for him. Absolutely.
So, and I don't know. Like as I said, you could go down the list, and it's like a lot of high caliber dudes and the wide receiver position. But anyway, of course, we just disagree on that. It is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree to disagree.
Which is the fun part about talking sports, right?
Absolutely.
The disagreements. Alrighty. But day 3, and then I wanted to break it down into day 1 and 2, and then also as one package, and then day 3. I thought that this was a much better day in day 3. So I think that day 3 did turn around a little bit for me. I still weigh day 1 and 2 more, but I thought day 3 was awesome. And we'll start with the Percy Butler, which obviously I don't know if anybody knew anything about other than Chris Sims, I feel like, and anywhere, and our guys, obviously. But Percy Butler out of Louisiana, apparently he might start 50% of snaps or something all of a sudden out as a 4th round pick. Where do you see this one going?
Yeah, so Ron pretty much said, look, we played our 3 safety look 53% of the time last year. So at a bare minimum, this guy's going to come in and play at least 53% of the snaps for us if we have it our way. So, I mean, they got big plans for Percy Butler. And, the fun part about watching him, there's some downside to him. I talked about him. He's all gas, no brakes.
Yep.
He'll come down, he'll miss tackles, things of that nature. I think he could be a little bit more instinctual, and I think that might come with more film study and understanding what, your responsibilities are and what the offense is trying to do to you. He gets more comfortable with his speed. He'll be dangerous, but what you can't teach is what he has, and that's just pure athleticism and speed. And you got to see him in single high look, so you got to see him play center field, and he's got red line speed. You got to see him play 2-man high, so you got to see him play a half of the field as a 2 safety look. So you got to see him play down in the box and as a run defender and a physical guy that can fit in his run fits. You got to see him as a blitzer down along the line of scrimmage. So that was impressive. I actually thought they should have done that with him more with that speed that he possesses. Thought he would be a lethal weapon in that regard. And then you got to see him in the slot, over the slot, which is something they're going to use him doing a ton of at this level, running with guys. So I think there was so many different layers to his game that you could really fall in love with. They did. And I think he's a guy that does have a huge upside. And I think they viewed that, and that's why they pulled the trigger on him, and they felt so good about passing on a guy like Jaquan Brisker, who went the very next pick to Chicago at 48. They felt so confident passing on him because they felt like there was another option that would be there for them in the mid rounds in Percy Butler, and they pulled the trigger.
Yeah, clearly that Percy Butler had to be a big reason why Brisker was just, yep, we're not even thinking about that direction in the second round. Agreed.
Mhm.
The one thing that I saw that was interesting in his game log was a guy that's supposed to be a true free safety, right? Like a true center fielder, if you will. Is it concerning at all to you or weird? I don't know. Like, I'd have to look more into it, but it just was weird to me that he only had one interception last year
Mhm.
all year long. And I watched it, and it was pretty much just a way overthrown ball that I could have caught. I mean, it was just a terrible throw.
Right.
So is that odd or concerning to you at all of a center field wide receiver, or not wide receiver, excuse me, free safety
Mhm.
that only has one interception all year long?
No, because when you watch him on tape, they
Yeah.
didn't strictly play him as a center fielder. Like he was
Yeah.
all over the football field. You would watch one game and he'd have 8 snaps at deep, free safety.
Okay.
He'd have 12 snaps as a 2 high safety. He'd have 6 snaps in the slot. He'd have 2 snaps down around the line of scrimmage. So, and then there'd be times where he wasn't even on the field. They would take him off the field altogether. So,
he just wasn't there enough.
He wasn't a guy that they just put there and said, "Hey, go track the football down."
Yeah.
And I still think there's growth in that part of his game, because when they would go over the top, there were times he would get there late.
Yeah.
So he's still developing in that regard, but he's got everything you're looking for. But a lot of times interceptions really boil down to right place, right time.
Yeah.
And when you're in the right place at the right time and you just get lucky, the ball caroms up in the air and boop, look what I found.
Yeah.
And I'm more nervous when a guy doesn't have any. Like if he goes through his whole career, he's played 3 years, he doesn't have any interceptions. Okay, that's alarming, because I just talked about a situation where the ball gets tipped, the linebacker drops into coverage, quarterback doesn't see him, the linebacker tips the ball in the air. One of those should happen to you in your career, or like you just mentioned, an overthrow, a gross overthrow, where you're just like, oh, looks a punch coming to you. You got to catch it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like you should come away with at least a interception. He had multiple interceptions in his career, so I'm not really too concerned about that.
All right, fair enough. Fair. I don't know if I even looked at the earlier years. I think I just looked at the one and saw that he only had one. But that's a fair point. If he didn't, because I did see him in the Senior Bowl, or the Shrine Bowl, rather, I think it was, where he was one-on-one in the slot with Ty Chandler, and he actually had a nice PBU on that one. So, yeah, it makes sense that if he didn't play there all the time, then how are you going to get a ton of interceptions? So, fair point there. All right, so now we have a couple of fifths and the sevenths. Probably not worth going too much into detail into any particular one of these, but what do you have to say about these last 4 picks for this draft?
So the fifths are huge. Like those are ones that they really are looking at and saying, hey, so keep in mind, one of the biggest things that they wanted to accomplish in this draft, Martin Mayhew talked about this pre-draft, is like, look, this is not a particularly top-heavy draft, but what it is one of the deepest draft classes in recent memory. Because of COVID and so many guys going back and having 5th and 6th year of eligibility, so many guys that would have come out the year before or maybe even the year before that, but because of everything that transpired, they went back to school. And now this, what 256 guys are going to be drafted, and there's probably 450 draftable players. So that's why, I mean, I think the most telling thing for me was after the draft was over last year, we had one undrafted free agent that we signed, and that was Jared Patterson. That was it. There just wasn't a pool of players that they were that excited about. That they didn't even think there were 256 guys. They even talked about it. It's not even 256 guys that were worth drafting. So they weren't really all that enamored with the guys that were left. After the draft this year, there was like 15 guys that they signed. Like, they went crazy because that's how many players they felt like were still good football players that could make your roster after the draft was over. So when you look at what they did, Martin Mayhew said, we feel like the best value in this draft is rounds 2 through 5. Right now, we only have a 2nd and a 4th. So of our 6 picks, we got 2 picks in what we deem to be the best value of this draft. We have to change that. And so what they essentially did was they took, the first round pick, traded back 5 spots, picked up 2 more picks in what they deemed to be the value zone of the draft.
Love that trade.
Then they took the extra 4 that they acquired, packaged it up with the 6 that they really didn't care about. I didn't either. and they got 2 5s. So essentially you get the 2 5ths inside that zone that we just talked about. So of your 8 picks, and they wanted to come out of the draft with 8, they came out with 8. Of your 8 selections, 5 came in that target zone where you felt like the value was its greatest. So those 5th round picks are not to be slept on. The 7th, okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
But those 5ths are important to them. They love Cole Turner, the tight end out of Nevada, because to me, what he represents is Washington moving into the future. We're finally catching up with everyone else. Everyone else has been splitting their tight end out wide, taking advantage of one-on-one matchups with linebackers and safeties for the last 7 years. And we've just been in line, or when we go 3-by-1 set, you got Logan Thomas out there, but no one's afraid of Logan Thomas. This guy's an XY receiver. You know what I'm saying? He's got receiver skills, catch radius off the charts. He had 10 receiving touchdowns last year. Some ridiculous catches. When you go watch his tape, he's going up and he's high pointing the football, one-hand grabs, catches in traffic. He's got to get a lot stronger. You know, that's one of the knocks on him, is that when linebackers get into his airspace and are physical with him down the field, doesn't really handle that all that well. He'll get stronger. He'll get better at fighting those guys off at the point of catch. But one thing's for certain, he can run routes. He's athletically gifted. No, he's not a 4.5 guy. He's a 4.7 guy, but he can run. He can separate with route running ability. And then if he doesn't separate, he can separate with his body and using his size. So they're excited about Cole Turner. I am too, because he gives us another dimension and unlocks another dimension that we didn't have previously. And then, of course, Sam Howell is the one that everybody wants to talk about. You know, forget about, you know, any other pick than Jahan Dotson. Is like Dotson and then Sam Howell. That's only picks anybody really wants to talk about with this draft.
Crazy value.
I mean, it's exceptional value in the 5th round, but it also gives us, you know, hope for the future in the event that Carson Wentz doesn't work out. We're not then, you know, relegated to, okay, what do we have to do to get up to, you know, 1, 2, or 3 to get one of these quarterbacks that we think could potentially be really good next year. We don't have to be in that boat. If Carson Wentz doesn't work out, Howell gives you an option that allows you to continue to build this roster and say, okay, we got a guy. Let's see what he's got. We haven't been in this position since 2012 when we drafted 2 quarterbacks that year, and Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins. And God forbid we didn't draft Kirk Cousins. What would we have done? Because Robert Griffin III clearly didn't work out here, and Kirk gave us an opportunity. So, you know, it's a similar situation to that. You got a guy that you really want to work out, but if he doesn't, there's another guy waiting in the wings that gives you hope and promise. So I love the selection, love the value that we got there. But at the end of the day, I hope he never plays. I mean, I really hope he doesn't play in a Washington uniform. I hope that he turns out to be really good for us as a backup, and then we shine him up in the preseason, package him up, and someone falls in love, and we get a 2 for him or something in the future. Because Carson Wentz
Jimmy G,
playing.
a Jimmy G move.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm looking to do. You know, it never works out that way here in Washington. The likelihood is he'll be playing
this year.
This year, you know, he'll be full-time starter next year. He'll be playing at some point this year, because that's not how things go in Washington. So,
yeah, exactly. By week 10, he's our starting quarterback.
That would be the worst possible scenario. But that is so Washington, right?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it really is. It truly, it's great, because Ron Rivera just got an award, I heard, on Rick Snyder's. I don't know if you follow him at all, but he's a Washingtonian through and through. But and I can't remember what it was called, but Alex Smith won it last year.
The George Halas Award.
Yeah, George Halas, basically the one who faced the most adversity. And yeah, like, just after I watched that video of Rick, just going back on it, unbelievable. The adversity that he's been through as a head coach. I mean, just year 1, a name change, sexual allegations, COVID, cancer. I mean, that's just like a joke you throw on the end. Oh, and he got cancer. Like, no, it didn't. That didn't really happen. No, it actually
did. Yeah, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
4 quarterbacks in that still somehow made the playoffs
right?
And took Tampa to the end of the game, at least. I mean, was it really in doubt? Probably not, with Heineke in the last 4 minutes or whatever it was, but still one possession game deep into the 4th quarter. So it is kind of ridiculous, isn't it, of how crazy what he's been put through here.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad he got the award, first of all, because
Mhm.
he didn't get it last year when he deserved it because of Alex Smith, and no one was going to beat out Alex Smith, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad they recognized that he went through a lot in 2020 and just said, hey, this is like an award that we have to give.
Yeah.
And I think Ron appreciated the opportunity here, but he also didn't realize what he was getting himself into. And I've talked about that numerous times. He's even spoke to it in a passive aggressive way about not really realizing all that entailed this job, all that this job entails rather. And it's not, he said, I would just rather focus on, that was his passive aggressive way of saying, yeah, it's a lot of stuff that I'm dealing with here. I would rather just focus on football, because, and I think that's part of the reason he went out and got, GM and guys that he trusted to come in here and kind of run the football operation side of things and roster management and things of that nature, because it's a lot. And, you're swiping away and swatting sexual assault allegations that have nothing to do with you, that were, happened way before you got here. But it's coach centric. So you got to answer these questions, right? Like, this is why Dan put you in charge, because he doesn't want to answer these questions. So
happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Exactly. So he's going to put you out in front of the media. You have to answer these questions about the name and sexual allegations and mistreatment and misconduct in the organization. And you got to answer all of this stuff. And then you still got to find a way to get your football team to be competent. You got to answer questions on Dwayne Haskins and why he's out partying with no mask on during COVID. And, God, rest his soul. But
you had to cut the 15th overall pick that same year too.
I mean, you had to do a lot of things in that first year, for the betterment of this team. And so it was a hell of a roller coaster ride. A lot of people don't really realize all of the things that Ron went through and achieved in that 1 year. But I think it really built a foundation here. Guys want to play here for Ron Rivera after seeing him. Those guys that were there that first year when Ron was here, watching him come to practice, knowing that guy was out of it, knowing that he didn't have much to give, but whatever he had left in the tank, he brought it to work. Like they saw that, and that they talked about that, and he got choked up. Remember, they presented him with, I want to say it was like a check or something for a donation or something, but they did a tribute video, and like Jonathan Allen and Chase Young and all the leaders of the team spoke on the video about his perseverance and what they saw from him and the strength. Logan Thomas, all those guys spoke, and Ron got choked up. He didn't know it was coming, and it had a profound impact on them.
Yeah.
It was funny because people were like, well, why JD McKissick? Why would he want to come back here? The Bills are a Super Bowl contending team. Why would he want to come back? Because they want to play for Ron Rivera. They think that he's turning this thing around. Like, you wouldn't get that if you're outside the building, but those guys in that building believe in Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
That's why the whole Terry's going to want to leave. Terry doesn't want to go anywhere other than here. If they show Terry the money, he will sign on the dotted line. He's not going, and trust me, they're going to show Terry the money, right? They're not going to allow Terry McLaurin to walk because of what he represents. You talked about it, how he's the guy that you want on the field, off the field. He's well respected. But I talk about branding, and I talk about the brand and what guys like Jonathan Allen and Terry McLaurin mean to the brand. They mean so much more. Chase Young also means so much more to the brand than just what they bring on the football field. They have to play at a high level for them to matter. But because of their standing within the organization, you see anything Washington Commanders, and if there's a player attached to it, it's one of three guys, okay? It's Chase Young, it's Jonathan Allen, or it's Terry McLaurin, okay? They're not letting – they already re-signed Jonathan Allen. They're going to re-sign Terry, and if Chase Young comes back and plays well, he'll get his too. All right, so those are the guys, and now you're seeing Carson Wentz being added into that conglomerate. They can easily take him out if he doesn't play well, but they're hoping, because in this league, you feature your quarterback. He's supposed to be the leader of your team. He's supposed to be the guy that if we've got a game on Thursday Night Football and they show the little marquee with the player for each team, it's supposed to be your quarterback. If they don't show your quarterback, that means your quarterback stinks. They got to go to some other player because your quarterback is garbage.
Yeah, you see Chase Young and Tom Brady, not Heineke and Brady.
Absolutely. You're going to see Chase Young because that's a more marketable name, a guy that is a household name. Nobody knows who Taylor Heineke is, but they would prefer your quarterback be out there. So,
yep, absolutely. Awesome. Well, what do you think that Terry contract's going to look like? What numbers are you looking at here?
so it's just amazing how that number just keeps going up the ladder to the next step. So that contract started at anywhere from 18 to 20 million. And I was like, it's probably closer to 20 than the 18. Then we saw DJ Moore get a contract that was right around 19.5. So basically 20. So you're like, okay, he's better than DJ Moore. So that takes the number it starts at 20. Okay. Yeah. If I'm his agent, DJ Moore just got this deal.
Yep.
Terry's better than him.
Yeah.
All right. So it's 20 million. Then you see the ridiculous contract for Christian Kirk. And that kind of reset the market. Like, wait a minute, this guy doesn't even have 1,000-yard season under his belt. Jacksonville's banking on his best football being yet to come. Yeah. And I get that. But wow. Okay. Yeah. So he's getting 20 plus a year. You know what I'm saying? He signs this ridiculous deal. You're like, okay. So that moves it up to like, okay, I'm thinking 21 to 23, maybe 22 and a half, somewhere in there. It's going to probably be that magic number. And then, of course, you get the big deals. He's not in that tax bracket. He's not in the Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill market. You know, those guys push it to 30. I think Hill is 30 a year and Devontae is 28 and a half, I think, something like that. He's nowhere close to those guys.
Yeah, I was looking at the Hill contract, though. I know it says 30 a year, but isn't the last year of that contract like $55 million cap hit with only 5 guaranteed? Like, he's not going to see a lot of that money.
He's not going to see a lot of that money, but the aggregate of the first, I think, because it's if I'm not mistaken, it's like a 4-year, $120 million deal, something like that. Those first 2 years, it's pretty much 30, 30. It's like 60 million over those first 2 years or whatever. I think it's total the first 3 years because that last year is voidable. They're not really worried about that last year,
right? But that is still included in the 120, though.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Those numbers are for the agent. So that's the number the agent wants to be out there because he gets a percentage of the 120, right?
Yeah.
And the agent can't take any more than 4%. And so that's a big number for the agent, but it also is something he can run back to his other clients and say, hey, this is what I'm putting out.
The agent made out crazy. I'm just curious where Tyreek is going to
but we all we care about is the guaranteed money. The guaranteed money, and I think it was something like 70 some odd million or something like that of guaranteed money. It's a lot of money for 3 years, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, but so on average, what we look at is on average, and that's 30 for him, 28 for Devontae. Yep. And then you saw the AJ Brown deal. He got
25, I think.
$25 million, 4 years, 100 million. So you're like, okay, Terry's right in that range, right? Same draft class, comparable numbers. Wow. Okay. And so now you're trying to reconcile in your brain, how are we gonna, do this? And so it's gonna be somewhere. To me, the base is 23, and the ceiling is 25 and a half.
25 and a half.
Don't go any higher than that.
Yeah.
If Terry is like, I gotta be paid higher than AJ Brown, then okay, 25 and a half.
Yeah.
But I can't see this thing getting to 26 or 27. I don't see it going that high.
Yeah.
And I still think he comes in under AJ Brown, but slightly. But I could see a case where his agent is like, no way. My guy's better than AJ Brown. AJ Brown's had a stable quarterback situation, and look at his numbers. Look at my guy's numbers in 3 years playing with like 8-9 different quarterbacks. If not for a concussion injury in his rookie season that cost him the final 2 games, you're talking about 1,000-yard receivers his first 3 years of his career. So it could easily be 25 and a half. I don't see it getting any higher than that.
I saw a video of I think it was like First Take, where they were saying like AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel, and Terry McLaurin, like who's better in this kind of stuff. They didn't mention Terry once after the question was asked.
Right.
And they just kept talking about how bad the quarterback play was of Ryan Tannehill for AJ Brown. I'm like, Terry's in this conversation, and we're talking about how bad AJ has it at quarterback. That's insane. But that's what happens when you don't make the playoffs.
Exactly. I'm about to say that. That's what happens when you're not a good team.
Yeah.
When you don't make the playoffs, your team isn't any good. Yeah. They ignore you. Deebo Samuel was in the NFC Championship game last year, and the Titans were the number 1 seed. in the AFC.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget that, but they were the number 1 seed, and they had the best record in the AFC and had a first round bye. So it's easy to forget about what Terry's doing out here.
Absolutely. All right. So just a couple last questions here. And thank you again for your time. Thanks for everybody in the chat. All right. So now the roster, there might be a couple of moves here or there, but we're getting close to it being completely set. Where do you rank this roster, I guess, amongst the league and the NFC? And what are your realistic expectations for this season?
So this is a middle of the pack roster. We haven't separated ourselves. I think you could look at us anywhere from 19 to 14, somewhere in there, roster wise, probably closer to 19 than 14 at this point. Guys have to show up. Curtis Samuel has to show up. William Jackson III has to play like he did the back end of the season. We got to get the best out of Bobby McCain. Chase Young has to be Chase Young, or else, Montez Sweat has to step up. These are the things that we're looking for from some of these guys that we view as some of our best players. I'm looking for Cam Curl to take the next step. I'm looking for they're lauding and praising. You talked about linebacker being a big need. They didn't even take a linebacker in the draft. So they're banking on Cole Holcomb being really good this upcoming season. And now they're lauding and praising Cole Holcomb. I watched Jack Del Rio speak, and he's talking about how good Cole Holcomb was last season and how they think he's going to be massive this year. So we need guys to step up. We need guys to play, at the level that they're fully capable of for this roster to take that next step. And if we get it from the quarterback play, that's where it needs to start, at the quarterback position. If we get it from the most important position in all of football, then it might trickle down to the rest of the roster. And this could be a much better roster than people think. As far as the expectations for this team are concerned, I look at this schedule that we'll be playing this year, and to me, I hate to play the schedule game, but if these teams are what we think they are, we've got a favorable schedule. We got some games that we can absolutely win, and if we can take care of business in the division and go 4-2 in the division, there's a chance to really do some serious damage this year. But again, it starts at the quarterback position, and none of us actually know what the hell we're going to get from Carson Wentz or anybody at the quarterback position for that matter. Who knows what's going to happen? So, it's hard to really say. But, I think for me, last year, there was a floor of 7 and there was a cap of 10. Like, there's no way we're winning more than 10 games. That's if the ball bounces our way and everything goes, including health, our way. Then we win 10 games. I think the ceiling is greater this year because of the, Carson Wentz and the potential of him, and then this roster being in a much better spot from a skill, position standpoint. We're better at tight end. We're better at running back. We're better at wide receiver. You could argue we're deeper along the offensive line than we were a season ago. So offensively, that's been the problem. Really, we thought the defense would be the catalyst, right? Last year, and they weren't. Not until the second half of the season. But we thought they were going to, out of the gates, were going to be the vehicle, the engine that drove this vehicle, and they weren't. But we still expected the offense, because we said, well, the offense can't be any worse than it was the year before, right? Like, it can't be any worse. So we expect the offense to be better. And then it wasn't. It was kind of like this thing. Like, we had our moments. There was the Giants game. There was the Falcons game. There were games in there. There was a Carolina game. There was a Tampa game where this offense looked really sharp and we scored points. And you're like, hey, we can do this. We can bottle this up. We got a shot. But it was so inconsistent.
Right. So
I think the key for this team, once again, because I think the defense, even if it's not what we want it to be, it'll be good enough to give us a chance to fight. This offense has to be better. We can't be scoring 22, 23 points a game. You're not going to win very many games doing that. You're going to have to score 27, 28, 29 to really be in that discussion. And if we can take that next step offensively, we got a chance to win a number of games. So
fair enough. Awesome. Well, I guess in the the schedule discussion earlier, I forgot that there was a couple of leaks. I guess I'll end that on this real quick. But well, supposed leaks, nothing's confirmed. But Giants week 1, Eagles on a Monday night game, and then apparently maybe Lions on Thanksgiving. Is that?
I
That's
haven't
weird,
heard
huh?
anything, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
be shocked for 2 out of 3 of those. The Lions on Thanksgiving is iffy for me because they
Yeah.
generally reserve that game for a division game. But I mean, we've seen them play, different teams. They played Houston and teams like that on Thanksgiving before.
Yeah.
But it's usually a divisional game for them. But we'll see. I'm done with Thanksgiving. I hope that's not the case. Like, we need a Thanksgiving break. Like,
Yeah.
we've played on Thanksgiving like 4 times in the last 6 years. Last year was like the first time we hadn't played on Thanksgiving in like 2 or 3 years. I'm good. Like, just
I'm
let me
good.
enjoy my Thanksgiving food in peace and not be nervous wreck watching the game. But the Giants week 1, that sounds very plausible.
Yeah.
I know the Eagles are going to be a primetime game because
Right.
I think it's going to be the one on the road with Carson Wentz. I'm thinking they probably want that earlier, sooner rather than later, just to make sure that Wentz is healthy because that's the whole storyline surrounding the game. So I could see that being one of the early season primetime games. But the Eagles already have a Monday night game. I don't know if you've seen the double header that they have. The Eagles are on Monday night in week 2 on the back end of a double header on Monday Night Football. So I don't know if they'll have the Eagles on like week 3 on Thursday Night Football against Washington or something like that. So we'll see where those games are. But that's interesting. We'll find out a little bit more about the schedule tomorrow, and then we'll finally get all of it on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for everybody in the chat. Really appreciate you. And so what's next for the channel, or any last things for the channel that you wanted to shout out? I know you have a second channel also, or how do you want to do it?
It's always this time of the year is always about growth. It's off season, not much going on. If you're putting out a ton of content right now, you're probably reaching, for stuff.
Probably.
Yeah, because I don't want to take anything away from people who are putting out content this time of the year. But I saw a whole bunch of training mini camp videos. I'm like, really? Like, what are we doing here, guys?
You're not drooling over minicamp right now?
I mean, seriously, what could you really have gathered from minicamp?
Slant pass from
Howell
to Dotson.
Woo!
Oh my goodness.
He looked awesome. Like, what are we doing?
17-0 Super Bowl. Let's go.
I mean, so there's not really a ton of content right now. So this is the time to really grow your brand. If you're, a content creator, this is the time to start coming up with some ideas for the future and kind of start getting those things behind the scenes done. If you are looking to do any additions or improvements to your brand, this is the time to do it. So I'm kind of in the works with that stuff. Still going to have content coming out, obviously. And there's still things to talk about, with this team. But obviously this week will be easy because the schedule will be released on Thursday. So we'll be live on Thursday. The schedule comes out Thursday. And so we'll be able to kind of sit there and really dissect the schedule as it comes out, and we'll probably get bits and pieces of it as we always do during the course of the day. Nobody's able to keep a secret these days.
Right.
So we'll know probably half of the schedule by the time we get to, 8:00 when they've released the schedule fully. But we'll be able to really, take a look at it, sit down, analyze everything, look at any quirks with the schedule, with primetime games, where the divisional games are, when are the Dallas games, when are the Giants games, Eagles games, so forth and so forth. So got to go to Indy. That's going to be a big one for Carson Wentz as well. They're still talking about Carson Wentz to this day over at Indianapolis. So, I mean, that's going to be a big one too. So, the schedule will be interesting. Yep. And everybody will want to come up with a prediction then at that point. Oh, okay, looked at the schedule. Now we're 12-5, or, this is a 9-8 schedule or whatever. So it'll be a lot to really discuss there. But as far as, some big thing, I think I got a couple of things coming down the pipeline. I'm not sure if they're going to happen or not. Okay. So I don't want to say.
I got you.
But I am working on a couple of things behind the scenes to see if I can get them to happen or not.
Well, good luck. I hope it works out.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I will be back tomorrow night with, of course, Skins in the Game with my dad at 7, and then Rio is coming on the channel at 8:30. So we'll talk to him, and I may have a couple other guys later in the week. So stay tuned for that. Sub if you haven't. Hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and until next time. See ya!